Right, in studio today we have writer-director Ben Younger. Welcome to Ami's house.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Did you fly here on a plane and land on the roof of the building?
I did.
Very cool.
It's a very small plane.
Ben, you are cool, man. There's no way around it. You're cool. You do cool things.
You could say it for a Jew.
Make movies, you fly planes. For a Jew and for a regular person. Very cool. So I want to just hear, let's get right into it. Your latest adventures. You're fresh back from, we've been covering a lot of Israel stuff. It's not the only thing we talk about. We talk about creativity. We talk about music and film and all of that. But in the interest of not letting things go too quickly and Israel being front of mind, I'd like to hear about your trip.
Yeah, I just got back. I was there with my cousin Harvey. We went for 3 weeks. Decided the night before Thanksgiving, we were all just hanging out, drinking, said we should just go to Israel. It was one of those. It was great. We went with the idea of volunteering, but while I was there, I got some ideas. I write a monthly column for an aviation magazine called Flying Magazine, and it's usually not political in any way. It's just about my adventures flying around the country in a small single-engine Bonanza. But when I was there, I thought this is an opportunity, and I have a lot.
That's how you got to Israel in a small.
Yeah, right. I wish. No, it was El Al. Okay. But so when we got there, I thought this is an opportunity. I know a few friends who are ex-pilots in the IDF, both Apache guys, and so I ended up. I tried to just get to a military base, but I ended up getting access to what's called a Fire Direction Center. And they told me I am the only Western journalist or any Westerner, period, who got to go into one of these rooms. And it's maybe 3 times the size of this smallish room that we're in, and 15 people, monitors everywhere, and they decide and pick targets and engage targets from this room. Wow. So they'll call in. They basically have an officer for each of the 4 possible weapons platforms. So it'd be artillery, helicopter, fixed wing like F-16s, F-35s, and then artillery. I mean, we're jumping right into it here.
But that's how you get into the secret ops intelligence units of Israel. He writes for Fly Magazine. Let him in. It's okay.
Did you say Flying Magazine?
And I know Gadi.
Flying? Oh, okay, he can come.
And I know Gadi. Oh, you know Gadi.
You know Gadi. Oh, okay. Sit. Ben. Okay, bueno. Look. Okay, so watch this.
And Shai. No, Gadi and Shai. They're like, okay, well, clearly.
Wow.
That's fascinating because I've obviously seen videos of explosions and strikes, but I don't know how they happen at all.
Right. So it's funny you mentioning explosions and strikes. What I saw in the room, and this is what I just wrote about for my monthly column, was actually, and I did see one, and I'm happy to talk to you about it. What I saw was restraint on an order that they don't advertise. And we can talk about how sort of Hasbara needs some real help. That's the Israeli PR system there. They just, look, they're in the middle of a war, and it's not even like when we've been in, this country's been in war for 30 years. It's always been overseas. Yeah. So the PR department is immune to the actual daily vagrancies of war. They're polished. They bring you into, they have everything set up. There, it's like it's a country at war. So how we look at it is not exactly the most important thing that they're dealing with.
They also have the greatest storytellers in the world who are Jewish who probably want to help them. You know what I mean?
Like Jackie Mason, you mean?
And anybody in Hollywood
could tell a story.
Would probably be thrilled to get that call. I could help you out. Yeah. And they don't use it at all.
But the thing is, they didn't even, I don't think they really actually understood. They understood the Flying Magazine. It's an internationally recognized, it's the biggest aviation publication in the world. But they didn't really know anything else. They didn't do much background. It's kind of interesting.
It's an Israeli thing.
It's very Israeli.
Okay, so you like the planes? It's nice. tell your friend, I think they're going to love the planes. They're going to love the planes. But here's the thing. I'm always conflicted about this because I always feel like Israel is in this emotionally abusive relationship with the Western world that hates it. Yeah. And it's in a physically abusive relationship with its enemies right next door. But to the rest of the world that perceives it negatively as a default, it's an emotionally abusive relationship. And when you try to appease your abusers, it only makes it worse. I think about a relationship where, well, if only I showed you my good, how good I am, they're going to hate it more and more. Because if people object to Israel's very existence, if it offends them, a prosperous Jewish state, right, then to the extent that Israel is doing the right thing and the virtuous thing, it will make its enemies and its detractors more upset.
Yeah, it's just when you're being gaslit by the world, it's hard to stay silent. I have a friend who I just debated this with the other day. What I wrote for Flying had to be obviously around general aviation. But what I saw went way past that. And so I was going to submit something to the Times as an op-ed. And she said to me, sort of the idea that what you just described, that phenomenon that Jews have, because we're always in a constant state of shock that you couldn't possibly believe that, right? So she says, if someone says you're a pig, you're not going to actually deny it. It's so obvious.
Yeah.
And my feeling is we're in a position where we almost are forced to do so, because by that logic, we shouldn't engage with Holocaust deniers. We should just assume, well, everyone's going to know the truth. That's absurd, but they don't.
Yeah.
We're living in such an upside down world that those things we have to say, no, we don't have a snout or horns in our case.
Right.
But it is below us, and yet at the same time, it seems like something we have to do.
Yeah. I guess, as the lies are out there, if you don't say something or put up a shield, eventually it will break through. You can't just, I guess, rest on the laurels of people assuming.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Silence is almost like a sort of an admission of guilt. It's
I wonder. I don't know. I think the posture means a lot, and like the dignity and pride that we often don't show would go a longer way than we think it does.
Is that in agreement with what he? With
No, I think I mean I don't know. I think it's probably disagreeing. I don't know if I'm right.
In other words, what? Well, let's in
disagreeing.
terms of detail on restraint. I'm just
Yeah, I wanna
curious.
hear that too.
What kind of stuff did you see that surprised you,
so.
to the extent that you could talk about it?
Yeah. I can talk about everything I saw. I can't,
Yeah.
There are things there are technologies that I got to see in the room that I was asked not to speak about. But as far as the targeting,
iPhone 16 or something. They're like, he gave it to me. Shh. It's amazing.
yeah, they did things with matzah in that room. Like I don't want to get into it, but
But you saw stuff. You're like, oh wow. So protocol wise,
yeah. So I saw them take out an actual terrorist who I saw a man in a window with an RPG. And it's worth noting that we were looking at this building, and this guy, there's a major in the room who was in charge of the helicopter, which was the platform they decided to use based on, and this is worth talking about too. There was a lawyer in that room who looks at all the strikes. The IDF employs over 100 lawyers
so Jewish.
who just sue no.
Can I do something?
No, they're looking at these.
Everything goes.
They're
through a
looking at
chain.
possible targets, and they're deciding whether or not it meets the laws of engagement. So in this case, they decided on a platform based on where are the civilians, where are the soldiers, which platform should we use? They chose a helicopter, Apache, and the major in the room said to me, "Look at that building, 6th floor, where the rocket guy came out. What do you see? What's different?" And it's a very sort of like Bauhaus, very sort of plain-looking civilian building. It's 7 stories high, and I'm looking at it, and I can't tell a difference. He goes, "Look at the 6th floor window. What's different about it?" Sure enough, it was a foot wider on either side than all the other windows. So this is a common modification that Hamas will make to a civilian building so that the guy with the RPG has a better angle of view by widening the window.
So when they construct the building, they're widening.
No,
They
did
modify
this-
a
they
unit.
modify it after.
Modify it.
to use it.
To use
a civilian building, and they said this is going to be where
Exactly.
And are this is gonna sound like just super practical, but are you seeing like a color video? Because the videos I see of the strikes are these black and white. I can't tell anything that's going on.
I'm seeing real-time video that is, they have a pretty incredible surveillance capability that's not just drones, but they have King Airs, which are also Beechcraft. They definitely can see what's going on in all. But yeah, some of it's color
Where are the cameras?
in the drones.
In the drones.
Yeah.
They're flying around taking. Oh, it's so cool.
Yeah, it's not like the Jim Carrey movie. What was it?
Truman Show.
Yeah, it's not like the Truman Show. But they're
thought
doing.
maybe-
You didn't
a
show up at the
soldier.
end like Ed Harris. Hello.
Hello, guys.
So
I saw them
so
take
watch
out.
that, yeah.
Then what I saw 2 things that were interesting. One was a donkey pulling a 2-wheeled wagon with a guy who was just getting after it. I mean, he was just going as fast as you could tell from the overhead. By things it was passing, it was hauling ass down the street, and I thought, like, there's no other civilians around. What is this guy doing? I didn't have a complete judgment, but it just didn't feel right to me. And I was like, "What are you going to do? What are you going to do?" I actually didn't ask that. They were very busy. And when I say,
what do you do now?
When I say this was no dog and pony show for the American, I mean, at one point I got knocked over physically.
Wow.
They did not like that I was there. They did not care that I was there. No one offered me a seat or said hello to me. It was pretty like they're doing a job.
Yeah.
It's a Schatimi. There's a,
Yeah, I saw a lot
I
of
kn-
this.
yeah. That's a funny position to be in, just
They
standing.
drink all the coffee.
Oh, I was up against the wall, and I mean, I'm 6'4".
You're like
It's
knocking
hard
over,
for me to
pushing a button. Sorry,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Can I just do one? Can I do one?
Can I get anyone anything?
Oh my God.
I'm going to do a coffee run. So I
So the
see
donkey
them.
guy,
They,
yeah.
So the four officers,
Yeah.
the artillery, the fixed wing, the heli,
Yes.
the drone guy, they all start talking and they decide, no, we're not doing this. So they don't engage. Why? I asked the major. He's like, because the guy on the wagon is not holding a weapon, and they zoomed into the tarp that was covering the back, and we just don't know what's there. We can't just strike that. Great. I hear maze, maze. A few minutes later, and by the way, they're playing solitaire in between. Like they're trying to pass the time. It's
Right.
interesting. I see one guy literally playing solitaire on like an old PC. Then this new call comes in, and it's 5 guys running down the street, single file line. They're staying close to the building. Again, this is an area completely devoid of civilians. And I see them sort of sprinting along. I'm like, this doesn't look great. Like these guys look like they look combatants to me. But I'm affiliated, and they were more objective than I was. Is the point I'm trying to make? They said they conferred no. Why? Because they were not holding weapons. We just don't we don't know. Those could be 5 guys who were civilians who were let go out of a building. Who knows what? What's interesting is later that day, this major called me and he said that ground forces stopped the wagon with the donkey, and it was completely filled with RPG warheads and anti-tank warheads. So the restraint is something that Israel doesn't show, but I feel like is worth, like I said, no one's been in that room.
Yeah.
I feel like it was worth talking about here and wherever else, because
Yeah.
they only show, like you said, those strikes. They don't show them pulling back or not doing. But there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
But part of me thinks they're with the strikes. They're not talking to kids on TikTok in America with those videos. They're trying to talk to the rest of the Middle East, saying like, "Hey, we aren't as restrained as you might think we are, so don't mess around."
You think that's the point of that?
I think.
I think he's right.
Or it's- yeah.
I think he's right. I think Israel has 2 audiences. The Hasbara has 2 audiences.
Yeah, yeah.
One is the Middle East, which respond very, very well to strength, and they don't want to see restraint. Restraint
Right.
is not a deterrent to
No.
who.
right.
It's
And then the other audience is us, the rest of the world. And I think it's a sort of a distant second as far as audiences go and what's very pertinent.
Didn't it give you also just this deeper perspective on just how absurd it is that journalists in the West, and I got into it with a couple of anchors recently on a program on the Hill where it was asking me questions about military tactics, and I'm like,
That I saw that.
yeah, and I'm
clip.
like, I don't know, and neither do you.
Yeah.
And how comfortable is it for us to say, don't conduct the war this way? Like you're casting aspersions and judgments on a type of procedure you know nothing about. It's like judging doctors performing surgery. Well, I don't think they should have used that tool for the spine.
Yeah.
And I'm like, did you go to med school? Do you know how to fix a spine? Well, no, but it just seems like that person's limping now. So you must have done something wrong.
Which, to be fair, people actually do. I mean, look at COVID. Look at
Everything.
everyone does their research and then opines very easily.
But what's unique about Israel is it's Israel's military and the way it conducts. All right.
Hey-o.
It's Israel's. Something just happened here from a joke. No, Israel's military, the way it gets scrutinized, not just to the level of detail of every decision it makes, and you see wars and stuff that go on all around the world that optically look similar and comparable to Israel's, but only Israel gets held to this crazy standard where when Israel's engaged in a war, somehow, even though the optics look similar to other wars, it's somehow subject to this harsh judgment and scrutiny from the same people who know nothing about how to conduct a war. What do they expect war to look like? You know what I mean? And so
well, then that's where look.
So when you came away from this experience, I would imagine it would give you the sense of, wow, people know nothing.
Yeah.
But
the example you just gave, it's like you can every one of those examples that you give, you can make sort of one of 2 decisions. One is anti-Semitism is rampant and it's affecting even sort of anchors that you talk to. Or that a war has never been televised like this before, which you could make a case. I'm always looking for the please say it's not Jew hatred because if it is, I have no answer. If it's a TikTok war has never occurred before, no one's ever seen what the depravities of war look like, I much prefer that answer.
Yes, I know.
I remember on October 9th, I keep I'm observant, so I was keeping the Yontif, and then we turned on our phones the night Sunday night after it all happened. I remember me and my wife both went straight to Instagram. I remember thinking oh wow, we're gonna experience this war on Instagram. That's how we're gonna get our news, and that's gonna be very different and kind of scary. And that's exactly what's happened.
Yeah.
But it's not unique that Israel has gotten held to this crazy standard and level of scrutiny. I don't know what the answer is. It always seems low resolution to just throw out, it's Jew hatred. I don't want to say that. Right. And also, it is more complicated, I think, I don't like telling people they feel something about Jews without them realizing it. That to me doesn't seem constructive or productive at all, to say like, it is anti-Semitic what you're doing when they themselves aren't realizing it. But I think a lot of the conversation around Israel, if brought to their realization, you realize you're only caring about this issue, uniquely holding Israel to this standard and not the other, like destruction around the world or conflict. It's only this one that animates you in such a way.
Well, what's the difference? One, you're just using the word Jews, and one, but those arguments are both the same.
Yeah, no. So I just I know we had this conversation with Rabbi Wolpe when he was on about there may be a gap in your self-awareness, in someone's self-awareness, if the only state that offends you is the Jewish one, if the only state that's not allowed to, as Douglas Murray says, win a war is Israel, then there may be a gap in your self-awareness. But yeah.
What was your relationship to Israel before October 7th? Were you like mired in this stuff and like?
No, I've been before. I taught a master class at Tel Aviv University on directing.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love Israel. It always did feel like a home. It just never felt like one that. Look, American Jews look at Israelis as like Puerto Rican Jews, for lack of a better way of saying it. Basically, like tough Jews that cannot be fucked with versus. Jews in the diaspora who are sort of just trying to keep a low profile. So I think that we never thought of Israel as a country that needed much help.
Right.
We ourselves felt more vulnerable than Israelis did. October 7th changed all of that. So I had a close connection to Israel, but it didn't feel like it does now where, this is existential. Like we may lose this place that I thought didn't need much help from us.
Right. Puerto Rican Jews, I like the idea that they, when you arrive in Israel, like, come on in, it's okay, we're going to get some planes.
They're just barbecuing.
Yeah, plantanos everywhere.
I feel like it's also there's two traumatic events that happened. There's the obvious events of October 7th and witnessing like the slaughter of Israelis and Jews, and then the world's apathy towards it that still, I think, has not been made right in a way. So I kind of want to shift into that for a little bit. Like in your experience, colleagues, friends, people, like how did that warp your world in terms of all the different marginalized groups and peoples that people have easily spoke out against that weren't considered brave to speak out for, but a given, and yet somehow when it came to Jews, when it comes to the subject of Israel, and then just the anti-Semitism that we saw, the gut-wrenching anti-Semitism campus-wise around the world, you did not see this collective agreement. You saw it on a governmental level in some respects in the West, but not on a social level, not in the streets. And I don't know, were there phone calls you got from people or didn't get from people, these like disappointments in the world?
For sure. There was one in particular, obviously I won't name a name, but he's a relatively famous painter who was a friend of mine and who's decidedly not anymore. It started out amicable and we had brunch right after the 7th. Yeah. And, he was using a lot of Sean King posts to state his case. And I tried to explain to him that there was certainly a conversation worth having about the conflict, but if that was his source material, it's sort of a non-starter, just because a lot of it was just so obviously false. But that guy reached a lot of people, a lot of minds, sadly, and it was hard. It's hard to fight against obvious misinformation. It takes a lot of time. But ultimately, this other side came out that was not about honest discourse, and he got personal and actually sent me a text saying, hope you love what your chosen people are doing in Gaza.
There it comes.
So at that,
there it is.
Here we go. And we're done. Yeah. At that point, it's like, I'm not going to, I think that's the thing. Remember you were saying about, we used to always explain, but if they just understand. Yeah. I think when people use rhetoric like that, and you hear this a lot, believe Hamas when they tell you who they are, believe anyone when they tell you you are. Yeah. At that point, you have to realize that that's a lost soul.
Not redeemable.
You're not going to make an impact.
Yeah. You can't argue your way out of that.
Yeah, but overall, there's some relationships that have sort of, I would say that's an outlier. Most of, I would say, the people who maybe don't completely agree with me have more distanced themselves, but not outright ask for some sort of split. And then there's people who I've gotten much closer with. Right. I mean, in Hollywood, there is, I don't want to further any stereotypes here, but there are a fair amount, probably a disproportionate amount of Jews represented.
People who happen to be somewhat affiliated with Jews.
Yes. And you would never go, oh, you're Jewish? I'm Jewish. Yeah. In Hollywood, it was like, okay. And now there is a little bit more, and I don't think that's
a camaraderie.
There's a bit of camaraderie.
Awakened.
Yeah, when you feel like you're threatened, you circle the wagons to some extent.
Right.
But big thing was always, look, I read Chomsky in college, and I came home for Thanksgiving night screaming at everyone about how we put Somoza in Nicaragua and Batista in Cuba, and I would go crazy on Thanksgiving, and my parents would go, okay, you going back to work? I'm like, yeah, I have a shift in 2 hours at Noah's Ark in Teaneck.
Oh, God.
But
Chomsky, yeah.
so I was into it, but I would like to think that if I saw people doing the things that we saw on October 7th in the name of that ideology, I would have went, whoa, I didn't sign up for this. And so what I mean to say is that before October 7th, I was happy to talk to anyone about anti-Zionism, which I thought was a respectable argument. If you made your case properly, it had nothing to do with Judaism, but that there were issues with what was going on in Israel, and I think there are. At this point, it's hard for me to say that. There is this much daylight between anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism at this point. So it's hard to have a good faith argument now.
Yeah, the comments we get, the word Jew has been completely replaced by Zionist.
Just a nice cover.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll post anything. I'll post something about Sabbath, and I'll get free. I mean, I don't know if it's bots, but I'll get a lot of free Palestine on that when it has nothing even to do with Israel. So it's just like a holiday video or something, and free Palestine everywhere. But there's this weird. I'm picking up on this strange thing where there's like a silent. I don't know if it's a minority or a majority when you speak out against stuff and like speak as authentically as you can about something and being as true to yourself. Like when I was speaking out about Israel on my social media and everything, like. There's people who behind the scenes, like I maybe didn't feel comfortable making that statement that way, but I'm glad you did, and I feel empowered by that. Like, do you feel like there's both people who are like pushed away, like, oh my God, you're like being so unapologetically pro-Israel, and they're turned off, and at the same time, there's people who are like you said, closer to you, saying like, I feel the same way, but I'm just either like it's too complicated for me, the stakes are high, I don't know how to articulate this. Have you been getting it from both ends?
I have. It's harder for me, frankly, to deal with the latter that you were talking about, the Jews who are saying that, because I nod and smile and say, you're welcome, but really I want to say, well, you should be screaming just as loud. This is existential.
Yeah.
And when you see a wrong, you should call it out. I never posted this. You can go on my Instagram feed. I went to Minnesota with my girlfriend at the time, 3 days after George Floyd was murdered. I got in my little plane and we flew to Minnesota, and we were standing on the spot where he was murdered, and we marched. And the way that grew up in a pro-labor, very progressive Jewish household, and we were told to protect other minority groups because we were once one of those groups. Still are. That's the thing. Still are. We never didn't. We never weren't. And then same for Me Too. Same for trans. Same for. And then those 10 years of this woke ideology of being told that there was such a thing as a microaggression. I mean, in a Jewish home, can you imagine what? There's no such thing as a microaggression.
You look fat.
It's you putz every day. And, But we got on board with all these things because we were told they hurt people's feelings. Silence is violence. All these things, and now you realize when it comes around that
violence is resistance.
Right. That they're actually not allies, to use their term.
I did see a great tweet after October 7th that happened where it was like every woke linguistic inversion is just being turned on its head in the wake of violence against Israel. It's like silence is violence, real violence is resistance, and they went down the line of like believe all women except Israeli women. Every single.
I saw that,
and that was like, yeah, that.
It's hard to refute that.
Yeah,
that's when the anti-Semitism comes in. Although it's still, let's just hold out and hope that it is, because look, if it's anti-Semitism, there's nothing to talk about.
Right.
There's no fix. Parents need to stop passing this on to parents, to children. But if it is an artifact or a result of this sort of woke movement, which we know we've heard puts everyone into an oppressor framework, which we should talk about. Israel's So White, who tries to address that.
Yes.
Then that is, you can turn that train around, and it's slowly. There's cracks in that movement.
Yeah,
but that I'm hoping that it's that, because we can fix that.
I think I've said this a couple of times in engaging with people. Like, why do you talk to this person? I said, like, sometimes the person is hateful, but they have a massive platform. And we recently had a conversation with somebody who said, like, if they're already having a massive platform and they're never going to hear another side to it, like, then you have an obligation in a way to voice that view to them, because otherwise, like, they're already voicing negativity about this. It's already there. So, but there are people where it's like ignorance is easier to fix than hate. If someone's hateful, they got to work on themselves. But if someone's ignorant, I find that what's fascinating is it's not like when you argue on behalf of Israel, you're arguing against like unapologetically pro-Hamas people necessarily who are like, who hate Jews and are proud to. You're arguing against people who are arguing from the same principles that you're arguing from, which is very bizarre, especially on the woke left. It's like they're calling Israel the Nazis. But which entity in the region is closer aligned ideologically with Nazis? Hamas and the Charter or the IDF? It's like we're using the same sort of principles of like, we're anti-barbarism, we're anti murder and destruction and all these, we're anti like all of these things. And they're trying to argue from that, but they're throwing it at Israel, which to me is absurd. But I find that arguing from the same principles but arriving at opposite ends is really confusing to me.
It's bizarre.
But it means it's not necessarily like anti-Semitism. It's like a warped perspective that's confusing and probably
those are the moments where Jews go, but I'm not a pig. Where you just go, you can't possibly think that this is an apartheid state. You can't possibly think we're committing genocide. It's so these arguments they come across with they fold at the slightest bit of interrogation. They fall apart at the seams. So how can you possibly believe this?
So you came up with a cool idea to try to kind of a really creative idea to kind of try to combat that.
Yeah. And when you said about the woke stuff and the ideology, I want to shift into like what you've been doing as a strategy to it. Just to point out that I think a lot of it stems from not just the idea of like you were talking about marginalized groups that Jews have stood up for when you talk to people left of center who have felt this betrayal that you're talking about. If you push past just wanting to stand up for actually marginalized groups who are underclassed and are oppressed or haven't been given a fair shot, that's one thing. When you view everybody as their group identity being paramount, their immutable characteristics being paramount, and that's how you view the world in that oppressor-oppressed category, and whichever group you deem is the oppressed is necessarily the hero, and whichever group you deem in this racial category is the oppressor is necessarily the villain. That's where I think you get into this very dangerous territory.
Yeah.
I'm curious what this technique that you've been talking about.
What you just described is like the most reductive. It fits into the explanation for how it came to be, because it's so. The fact that we got behind a lot of those movements that then turned against us, if you told me one person knew all this was going to happen and that's why Qatar started donating billions of dollars, over a decade ago to these institutions, there's no way anyone's that smart. This is a butterfly flapped its wings situation.
Right.
It has to be. There's no way anyone could have predicted that even that the Western world would have this reaction so soon after October 7th. Like if I'm on the Hamas side, I'm going, wow, guys, this worked out in a way that like
you get lucky sometimes.
I can't believe how much better this happened.
Don't you feel like conservatives though have been sounding the alarm on like the dangers of voicing everyone?
The dangers, but I don't think anyone saw it.
The allegiance you mean between like the radicalist? You mean between like Hamas Islamist ideology?
That could have been that it could have been that it would dovetail in the way that it did, and that they could overlook the atrocities that happened on the 7th. I'm like,
Trump is a monster, but Hania and the heads of Hamas, I think, are onto something.
So I think the answer is, and the way you have to look at it is, you have to look at it as it's religion. You hear they use the word orthodoxy a lot in describing it, and it is a religion in the same way that jihad is Islamism, jihadism can be sort of so one-tracked. I believe that you can apply that to wokeism in some ways.
They also have a common enemy, which is the belief and the idea of the West and Western values being something that need to be torn apart and ripped down, that the Western patriarchy, the Western civilization is evil and oppressive, and therefore, the radical Islamist elements that want to destroy it agree with the far left Marxist woke ideology of wanting to destroy things and build it up from scratch, and it's kind of a power grab. So that's the only thing I could thread that makes sense to me, because in every other way, on every other idea, they're completely antithetical, but they do have this hostility towards, West and Western countries and Western values in some way.
And on a theoretical level, I think that's great stuff for a liberal arts education. That's me reading Chomsky at Queens College. But as soon as the 7th happens, everyone is inherently supposed to just go, well, hold on a second. Like these are not actions that sort of support any ideology, regardless.
Chomsky's so quiet, I can't hear him speak. He puts me to sleep. It's like, who's to say America's not a terrorist? Who's to say America's not an active terrorist? They're one of the most terrorist organizations in the world. Yeah, he's a very, very sleepy guy.
Yeah.
But I want to hear a little bit about you're creating content around this, highlighting this inconsistency.
This sort of reductive outlook that tries to put everyone into these two columns, you end up trying to put circle pegs in square holes. You have to. The biggest one that I hear is that Israelis are colonizers, which is hilarious for so many reasons. The easiest way to debunk it, obviously, is the fact that the reason Spanish is spoken all over the world is because Spain was an actual colonizer. The reason there's 22
Puerto Rican Jews, yeah.
The reason there's 22 Muslim countries and 50 Muslim majority countries is because Muslims went on a massive colonizing spree in the 7th century. There's a reason that Hebrew is spoken in one place on earth, Israel, because they're not colonizers. You would hear Hebrew spoken all over the world. That, and obviously the fact that to be a colonizer, you have to be able to take things from another country and bring it back to yours. There is no back. Where are you going to bring it to? Borough Park? It's like
It's a colony of what?
That's a very nice manure. Where'd you get it? Old City, yeah.
Gaza.
Yeah, right.
So I thought, because debating the war and even everything I said about the restraint earlier, I'm not unaware that there are still 25,000 plus dead human beings. Regardless of the ratio of combatants to civilians, a lot of people have died, and it's on camera, and it is grotesque and hard to look at. Sort of entering the fray on that topic is mercurial at best, and losing friendships, like I explained, at worst. I want to start with irrefutable facts that I believe probably help people position themselves in that second argument. But if your foundational truths are all off, your opinion then isn't based on, it's like in computer science, it's a garbage in, garbage out. You have to put the right code in to get the right thing come out the other end. So when I was in Israel, me and my cousin, one of the days we were supposed to go pick oranges, they ended up putting us on a weed farm, which was awesome. We were trimming weed. We took a little on it's not legal there. It's medicinal only.
Right.
So they wouldn't give us any. So we actually
You took a lot of medicine?
They don't make you do it just butt naked.
It's like New Jack City.
Hey, what you got on you?
Wow.
Spread them.
This is a pharmacy in Israel, yeah.
So we did. We took a little bit home.
Yeah.
My favorite image of the trip was my cousin Harvey with the what's it called? I'm gonna get him in trouble for this.
Okay.
But we had to dry it out.
Yeah.
We used a hair dryer.
Okay.
I won't say which hotel. That's what I'll keep.
Fair enough.
But
Patreon.
we do all this. They wouldn't let us smoke. We were very tired. We're driving home, and we see this very dark-skinned guy in an IDF uniform is filling up with gas. He did not look Jewish compared to what everyone in the world, and even what I think. That's how you know that people don't know. Is even I was like, is this guy Jewish? There's no way he's Jewish.
Yeah.
And I go up to him, and I was like, are you Jewish? He's like, of course. And I said, everyone in the
He's like,
U.S.
are you high? You're like, of course.
Are you?
Where are you coming from? You're like,
The weed
Jewish,
farm.
bro. He's like, another one from the farm, huh? Okay. Everyone asking me that when they drive by. Everyone come from the farm. They think they're seeing a hallucination.
And then they asked me if I have any to sell.
So you asked him if he's Jewish.
I was Jewish. He says, yeah. And I said, everyone in my country thinks that you look like me. And they think you all look like me, like a white Ashkenazi imperialist colonizer. And he's like, yeah, I've been seeing that on the TV. What's going on? And I was like, I don't know what's going on in my own country. Yeah. I said, you know what? Do me a favor. Just say this one line on camera for me. Just say the words, I am a white colonizer. Because it was so obscene with who he was, countering with that. He did it, and he could barely get the word out. His English was not great. And I thought, this is great. We can now show, because the truth is that 2/3, if you include the 20% of Arab citizens, of Israeli citizens that are actually Arab, we're talking about a number that's over 70% of people of color living in Israel.
Yeah.
And so I spent the next 3 weeks in Israel stopping every Mizrahi, Sephardi, Yemenite I could on the street. I'm 6'4". It was strange, especially when it was coming to women. Excuse me, can you just say I'm a white colonizer? Like some people ran. As soon as I got enough, I would just show them the video. I'd tell them it was satire. And we started this program or whatever, this campaign. And there's an Instagram page called Israel So White, which you can now go to. It's live. And it's just showing the world that this oppressor framework, it doesn't work. It's too complicated. And Israel is too nuanced and too varied.
That's amazing. I'll send you some accounts also. There have been accounts that have been doing things like that for years where they'll show photographs from the 1920s and 30s of like fully adorned Arabs, like with Torahs. Like like crazy stuff you never expect to be Jewish was happening in Israel forever.
Yeah.
And
What's nice about those photos and the people they represent is that is you can't argue that.
Exactly.
I only sort of want to sort of work in facts and things that are not debatable.
Yeah.
And images are so powerful too.
Yeah.
It just gets at it.
The only thing I note in that also is like for the sake of just truth itself and spin, like it's so valuable to have that. At the same time, I also want to like there are also white Israelis, and that's okay too. They're not bad for being like to play the game of like it's almost like we're allowed to defend ourselves. Watch, look what we do. Like I am just mindfully cautious of not wanting to cave to this framework that they have to be people of color to be okay and tolerant. You know what I mean? To be virtuous.
You're not wrong.
It's like there are white Europe. We don't want to concede the territory to. No. They're not white. Don't worry. Right. Oh no. There's my grandparents have siblings that moved to Israel and they're white, ish. But like white to me is not relevant. It's like an immutable. It's skin color. It's like Jewish identity, which is much more rich and complicated and like that is interesting to me. Like. This whole idea of whiteness.
I think you're right.
I don't want to see the territory to say, don't worry, they're also people of color. I want to do it for the sake of truth and to dispel that narrative. And I think showing that about Israel, like I think for a lot of people that are viewing the world that way, and that in that power class, a hierarchy on race, it's very valuable to show them that. But just for also our sake, it's like, it's multiracial, and Judaism itself is multiracial and mixed, which is a beautiful thing. And it's just the truth, you know?
Not to mention if you do DNA on Ashkenazi Jews, every Ashkenazi Jew's DNA does go back to the Middle East. Mm-hmm. They didn't start in Poland.
I took when it was like 99.93% Ashke Jew. But yes, that's where we had to go to, not where we had to come from.
Yeah. We're kind of wearing these like white costumes a little bit.
Us?
Yeah. Like I mean, like our grandparents. Nothing like us. Why do we even look like this?
Yeah, and I think it's more to dispel the notion that we're all individuals. We all have our cultures, and that it's all valid.
Yeah.
And to view things in these arbitrary, how much melanin is in your skin determines how much credibility you get for sympathy from the world. Something we need to move away from entirely.
100%. We're all But the fact that I even framed it and couched it in those terms shows that even I've been infected a little bit with this idea of white privilege.
Yeah.
But
I think what it does
in fact, people in Israel don't like the term Jews of color, which some people use. And apparently Ashkenazi Jews there in Israel are going, well, let's not even go down that road.
Right.
America got sort of tainted by
that
it.
Is an American. That's an American lens.
We're not even going to start that. And I think they're right.
Yeah. But I think it's valuable to reach people where they're at. So like you're saying, if you're trying to you're talking about these conversations you've had early on, whose minds am I changing? We had an interesting conversation once where it's like people have different narratives, and you can't just like tell somebody else your narrative to their narrative and it'll be persuasive. Meeting people where they're at, if they're viewing a world in a certain way, you first dispel like maybe I'm getting this whole thing wrong, and you peel back a layer and a layer.
Well, that's where what you say comes into play, which is imagery. I mean, if you see that person you're talking about holding the Torah who looks like he plays Dominican baseball, like you cannot. You can't refute that because this is a Jew. He just is.
We're determined to find the Jews of the Caribbean.
You want to see his schmeckle? Like, how much more do you want?
Yeah.
It's like, wow, that's a Jew?
Yeah. We had when Rabbi Wilpe was on, he said, if I wanted to combat anti-Semitism today, I wouldn't take someone to Auschwitz, I would take them to Tel Aviv.
Yeah. Great line. He's like, it's like, this is what a Jew is, and I'm going to blow your mind.
Yeah. You thought Queens was a multiracial...
I think
multi-ethnic.
Seeing street signs in Israel would blow your mind. Oh, Hebrew, English, and Arabic. I thought this was an apart. It's like even this little bit of exposure.
And we want the page to go to that. Just easily refutable fallacies that are just prevalent.
Yes.
Are you working on it on your own or with anyone else?
No, on my own. Because I need someone to take over. Actually, I have a full-time job. Do you want to do this?
I need a job. So that's perfect.
This was an interview. Good, Michael. You got it. Speaking of your full-time job, actually.
We want to. Go ahead.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes here. I just wanted to, I always appreciated, especially in Boiler Room back in the day, like you infused that. We had a pet peeve about like the way Jewish culture is portrayed in movies, in this sort of like BuzzFeed Judaism, Bagel and Lox, like the lowest hanging fruit of obvious stuff. But in Boiler Room, right off the bat, like you don't have a guy named David in there in the opening scene. It's a guy named Moshe. Like you put stuff in there that's like real. They talked about Jewish guys getting into fights in yeshiva versus like Italians fighting. Like,
Fucking Moshe.
but like, you know, you put stuff in unapologetically Jewish and unapologetically proud. Like, I always appreciated that. I remember first seeing the movie and I'm like, this might be the first movie I've seen where someone's name in like a real movie where someone's going by Moshe here and not David. You know, little things like that.
They go to Cantor's, like that's just where you go to eat.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be that. You don't have to call it out so much.
You want some chicken soup? It wasn't. It was subtly. It was
the Talmud says.
Yeah. So we've talked about, that's been a pet peeve we've talked about between us in the way it's been portrayed, and you did a good job of that. So
Thanks,
props.
buddy. It's funny. I hadn't seen Prime in many years.
Yeah.
And there's a dream sequence where, because me and my brother used to talk about what would kill our Bobby, our grandmother, who was Romanian, and certainly dating a non-Jewish woman, non-kosher, but we thought that she would never hurt us, she would hurt herself. So there's this dream sequence where she takes a frying pan and hits herself on the head. But what someone reminded me of that I didn't realize is that Brian Greenberg, who plays David, I got soft.
That's okay. No, that works, but at least you weren't, I get it.
In the dream sequence, he's wearing a t-shirt that says Palestinians do it better.
Okay.
And I'd completely forgotten about that. So even then, there was this sort of, I think there was an understanding that Bobby would probably not have appreciated sexual relations between her grandson and a Palestinian woman.
Yeah, I'm just curious. Michael's in this space a lot. He's in the film.
Yeah, I could talk to you about it for like 2 hours. Yeah. I mean, we don't have that much time. I guess like one of the questions I want to ask you just while we have the time left is, you made Boiler Room, which for me was a very big movie. I was like a little bit younger, and I remember hearing your story and just hearing that like a guy from our community could do that. Blew my mind. It absolutely blew my mind. And so you made a movie that was 2000, and then you made Prime in 2006, I think. 2005, and then Bleed It Out.
Bleed for This,
yeah. which I saw and I really liked, was 2016.
Yeah.
You made the movie industry has transformed in that time.
Yeah.
And you've seen it all.
Yeah, I've started up shooting film. Now we're on video.
Yeah. So I have a ton of questions about the actual movies, but just in the time we have left, I want to ask, like, for someone who was so successful, like early in their career, and has gotten to do this at the highest levels for almost 25 years, what does it look like between those movies for you? Like, what are you doing? How are you keeping busy? How are you keeping inspired? As like someone who's doing it professionally at the highest levels, what does that in between time look like?
It's an interesting question because I think my answer will be different than anyone's. I mean, you're probably not going to meet a lot of filmmakers that have taken 8 or 9 years off between movies. I didn't grow up wanting to be a filmmaker. I didn't grow up with a camera in my hand. We grew up Orthodox Jewish. There was no emphasis on the arts, as you guys both went to yeshiva.
Yeah.
I understand it's changing, but when I went, there was zero.
Very tough business. I hear it's a very tough business.
Yeah, but if you're Jewish,
that's all I know. I hear it's very difficult. Very few people make it. Very few people make it.
It is very true. And I had my mom's a social worker. My stepdad's a math teacher at Yavne. There was no, Uncle Gary's going to help you out.
Right.
So, yeah. But because it wasn't sort of the goal, growing up, like the way it was for, say, Spielberg or J.J. Abrams, it wasn't the end all be all. And so I sadly lost my dad when I was 19. He was only 44. And I just thought, I want to live. Because he was an accountant and he wanted to be a race car driver.
Oh, wow.
And he never got to do any of that stuff, even recreationally. And so to me, it was sort of living life was just, my life seemed, outside of work, seemed a lot more important. And I don't want to miss those opportunities. It turns out all of those things I did, my quality of life informed my work. So I wouldn't do it again, but I think that all those years in between they're spent living a really full life. I did race motorcycles. I became a pilot. I ended up buying an airplane. I went to Costa Rica. I cooked professionally at a restaurant in Costa Rica for a year. It was a friend of mine who needed some help with his restaurant down there. So any sort of opportunity that came, I just jumped at it, because that was the thing about our upbringing, was that it didn't really give you a lot of options. It was like doctor, lawyer, accountant, stay out of the gas chamber. Literally, that was what we were taught. There wasn't even shop class in yeshiva when I went there. Turns out working with my hands.
better
was
now.
something that I really liked. I liked working on.
The community has moved slightly incrementally towards embracing the idea that creativity in general is there and can be nurtured in some way.
and it's
maybe up to senior year, and then you got to get serious. But at least it's there. But I think we're in a world now, like the industry itself was this gated off thing in a sense.
Yeah.
So like I think it feeds into itself because the Orthodox Jewish life to sustain it is expensive and requires a lot of stability, and there's a lot of anxiety around that. And today, it is in fact an industry that's a lot more open to different opportunities with the internet and online and digital audience. And the way you can make it now is very different.
But is the Jewish community open
Yeah.
to that? That's the question.
I think the Jewish community is open to like stability and can you provide and sustain,
I see,
right?
I see.
Meaning they don't care what you do. They're like, apparently,
It's
I was
not-
like, he does
it's
very
not
well for
a-
himself. What does he do? Perfume boxes.
It's not an Irish kite anymore, is what you're saying.
I think
which is what my
it's
grandfather
gained a-
said to me when I
Yes.
said I'm quitting the New York City Comptroller's office to go be a grip
Yeah.
and make movies. He
Right.
was like, "That's an Irish kite." Which
If waiting
means,
tables made you
nonsense.
$500,000 to $1 million in a few years, they're like, you should definitely wait some
wait
tables
tables.
like Shlomi does. He's doing very well. Meaning they care about success. Generally, the community is oriented towards like success.
Yeah.
And as these fields have proven themselves to be more accessible to succeed in, it's still difficult, obviously, but back to the question of how it's evolved. I think
And creativity is also now it's a necessary skill to excel in any field
In a way, yeah.
where it wasn't as much. So I think now the kids kind of have to learn it to be good lawyers and good doctors and
Yeah.
consultants. But so are you? So you're living life. Are you writing also? Are you
Oh, yeah.
always working on a project?
Always writing. I write every day. I write
What do
that. I write that column for Flying, like I told you about.
Do you do a daily pages thing or anything like that, like a regimen?
No, but I do. I'm always
was a
always
compliment,
writing
right?
3 screenplays.
yeah.
I mean, I made a living between those movies doing script doctoring, rewrites.
Curious about that too.
Bleed for This was not an original. There was a script. I ended up doing a page 1 rewrite on it, but it was supposed to be a money job. And then I realized I had a lot in common with Vinny, this sort of comeback idea and being down but not out. So that's why I ended up directing it. But yeah, writing is, I would say I'm a writer before I'm a director. Yeah.
Cool.
But it's interesting because in the in-between when you have this amazing uninhibited like outlook on like a why not thing. Like life is this fleeting thing, and I think that's instilled in you, it sounds like. So it's like, go have these adventures, like
Yes.
be a chef in Costa Rica.
You articulated actually something about myself, I think, that I didn't know how to. Maybe I was like too embarrassed to say that out loud, but like, cause I write also, like professionally, but I also like I work in real estate. I do other things that always make their way into my scripts, like. And my friends in LA who are just writing, and it's all they do, all they know how to talk about is writing. All they can talk about is Hollywood and like working on stuff. And it's like they don't know what they want to say, and they don't know they don't really have a world they want to like show.
I know a lot of writers have gone out there and have lost the thread because they're then living in a one-horse town. My best friends here are an emergency room doctor, an architect, a drone operator. I mean, you have to take the subway every day, and you have to sort of subject yourself and expose yourself to other cultures, other lives. Otherwise, where are you going to pull from?
Yes. How do you square that with the the discipline?
Going to the mikveh? Oh, sorry.
Yes, there's great material there. But the discipline that it takes to see a creative endeavor from something in your mind to tangible form to a finished product, I mean, that long game, especially in film.
Oh,
I mean,
it's brutal.
It's so brutal, and I've seen it in various. I'm in the music and comedy side of things, but even to just the dedication it takes and the consistency and just the grit and the grind with also wanting to live a full life, an informed life with experience. How do you balance that out? Did it happen to be like with Boiler Room? You did that in like your college years developing it, and then like what was the path for that to become the movie? And
Yeah, I mean, Boiler Room was not. Boiler Room came to be because I took an interview at what I thought was a legitimate brokerage house. It turned out to be a boiler room, but I was broke one winter. I was a grip. There was no work. Things dried up. I had to make rent. And I thought I'll just go be a stockbroker. 'Cause,
So you put on a big suit.
yeah, I don't know. That scene with Ben Affleck where he's giving those kids the speech. I sat through the real life version.
yeah,
And did you immediately know this is my thing?
Yeah, well, I looked around the room and these kids were all buying what he was saying, and I was like, "This is clearly illegal."
Someone actually get kicked out in 2 seconds?
And bullshit. No.
Oh, that was good.
But I just thought, okay, this is going to be the first movie. But if if I hadn't been poor, I mean, when I say poor, I've never even admitted this, but I got caught shoplifting at the Rite Aid on Manhattan Avenue in Greenpoint.
Right.
I wasn't doing it for kicks. I was broke and I needed those Mach 3 razors. to go to a job interview, and I got busted. And I thought, okay, I got to get a job. This is crazy. I can't. This is not.
I'm just gonna give it back.
Yiddishkeit.
2 seconds. God, don't be such a stiff.
So yeah, I mean, you know, and that's what money job. I mean, look, and there's such a thing as a money job. Thankfully, in my business, I don't have to step out like you said and do real estate, or that's a bad thing. I'm sure you're doing great, young uncle. But there are. I mean, the New Yorker just did a great piece on what's his name.
Lee Eisenberg?
No, the guy who wrote Out of Sight and Scott Frank.
Okay. I read that, yeah.
It was great. And he said that he became the king of rewrites to the point where his own work was starting to suffer. But he said that he took so many paying jobs that one of the rewrites, it was actually for a movie called Paycheck. And that's when he realized, all right, I got to stop doing this. So yeah, you can make it through between the movies if you want to. I'm not saying it's soul satisfying work, but you can do it.
Right. Is there a story of like you have a finished I mean, maybe you could speak to this too and how the process works of getting, you know, the chicken or an egg thing. You're going to get people into the movie that could give it visibility, but it hasn't been tried and tested yet. And then, it's up there. But you have like getting it from there's A to Z, but A to B, moving something along to actually get that finished product made when something hasn't been tested yet.
I wish I could say there was a sort of a standard progression of things. I've only seen movies come together. I've never seen 2 movies come together in the same way. Sometimes a piece of cast comes on, sometimes a financer comes on. It's a miracle when a movie gets made.
Right.
Because it's a personal art form that requires hundreds of people to help you. You're not like writing songs in your Williamsburg loft or painting, which you can do on your own. It just requires so much capital. And
at this point, with like the resources you have and the way the industry is, do you ever, maybe this could be the last question, do you ever consider doing something just totally independently on your own, just with a script that you love? Or are you sort of used to the system? And
no, I would say I'm outside of the system. Bleed for This, we made for $6.5 million. A guy named Josh wrote the check. I mean, Scorsese came on as exec producer, and that helped. Boiler Room was New Line, but it was $7 million, and New Line was a very small studio. Prime was not at Universal when we made it. It was Bob Yari, I think, was the finance. So I've actually never been in the system you're talking about.
Okay. So
I would like to go into it.
Well, we can help you with
is
that.
Cushy.
I'll make some calls.
You get a trailer when you enter that system.
Yeah.
You're not standing outside the Dunk Center in Providence, Rhode Island, wondering when you can go and get warm and get some coffee.
But overall, would you say that today's environment is better for the independent creative filmmaker, musician, artist? I tend to think that because there's all this access to building an audience on your own, you got to do more of the work. But compared to what it was when you were starting out, as to now, to get something made and finished and out there.
There's other avenues, but it's you have to separate the wheat from the chaff. There are a lot of people who have been given jobs, going back to the woke movement we talked about, who were not ready for the jobs they were given. And this is where, this is probably worth talking about. Sort of on an ideological level, it is very worthwhile to try and help people who maybe would not have the same shot. This is going to sound weird. I could have used that help. I don't look like skin color-wise someone who needed that help, but I did because my mom's a social worker, because I was in North Jersey and I went to a school that had no arts program. I could have used that help. So now we're trying to help people like that who had no access to the industry. But if you put people in positions where they're not really ready for them, not only are you hurting them, you are hurting the larger group that they represent. I don't think that certain things can't be rushed, and there should be a progression of things where you are an intern and then you do this and you do that. If you push them to the front of the line and they screw up, then it looks bad for everyone who was in that.
Or if they succeed and can't sustain it because they haven't had enough of that foundation in the game, like in the grind, to do it too.
Yeah. So yes, I think that there's a lot of opportunities, but there's a lot of people doing it who shouldn't be doing it.
Yeah.
But they're going to start making less shows. They're already now making less movies. So
I'm trying to be one of those people who has a job they don't deserve. I'm working towards it. It's actually harder than you portray it as.
Well, if you fail wildly, you can fail upward. Hollywood is very good at that.
Yeah.
All right. Ben Younger in the house. Thank you so much. Thanks for sharing your adventures and stories. Please fly me out here. I want to go for a little flight. Maybe we'll take an Ami's house Journey to the Sky. But keep telling your story. I look forward to more of the stuff you're going to put out.
Yeah, and wait, Israel Not So White on Instagram?
Israel So White.
Israel So White.
So White.
Israel So White.
We're trying to bring in people who might think
It's
that it is, and they'll go, yeah, it is so white.
Follow Israel So White on Instagram, and thank you guys for joining us here at Namaste, and thank you, Ben Younger.
Thank you, brother.
Appreciate your time.
Thanks,
Thanks,
man.
man.